Hello, my name is Ed Patterson. I do it to my friends. Thank you so much for joining me today. I want to ask a question. I'm going to tell you a man's name. I want to know if you've ever heard of that man's name. His name is John Corrill, spelled C-O-R-R-I-L-L. He was famous in the history of the church, but almost nobody knows who he was. So by the end of this video, you'll find out who he is and why he's so important to us and how we deal with antis. Okay, so the topic today is talking about the first of the two great anti-Mormon books. I've discussed them before. This one is Mormonism Unveiled, in 1834 published, to an acclaimed America who wanted to know why the Mormons were wrong and hoped they would just go away, which neither happened. So, this book was built upon several premises, as all anti-books are. That's fair, it's life. So first premise, let me just kind of go through these with you. First premise, Sidney Rigdon to the world was offered as the original author and proprietor of the whole Mormon conspiracy and the Book of Mormon. So now Joseph becomes a front man, but he's not the creator of the Book of Mormon. He's not even involved with the Book of Mormon. Sidney Rigdon does it all. Interesting. Premise 2. The historical past was stolen from a manuscript written by Solomon Spaulding. He wrote the book in 1816. It was a romance between the Romans who got lost at sea, hit in America, and the Indians. And they got together, intermarried, had wars, had fights, but as you've seen in an other video from me, I've read Manuscript Lost, and there's not one word in it, name, that's used in the Book of Mormon. I'll get to that a little bit later to bring that around. Premise number 3, Sidney Rigdon and Joseph Smith, for purposes of fraud and deception, produced the Book of Mormon by altering a manuscript written in 1816 by Solomon Spaulding. So yes, again, Joseph being used as a dupe. He's kind of a good speaker. People are kind of drawn to him, but he didn't really do that. It's all on the back of Sidney Rigdon. Last premise, affidavits from Spaulding's friends in Ohio prove that the Spaulding manuscript was used as the foundation of the Book of Mormon. So now the antis go, finally, we have evidence that shows the Book of Mormon is false, which is what they're all about. Are there problems with that thinking? You betcha. So let me kind of go through what that is. So we've talked about the Spaulding manuscript. I really don't want to talk a lot more about it other than I have it, I've read it, and there's nothing in it that accords with the Book of Mormon. They've had, when it was first found in 1884, the person who found it over in Hawaii signed an affidavit. I've read this book. It is not the same as the Book of Mormon. Okay, so we can kind of just put it to the side for a little while. But what we are going to focus on in this video is Sidney Rigdon. So what was the deal? What really happened? What's going on with Sidney? So if you remember the story, Philetus Hurlburt was kicked out of the church, upset, didn't like the Mormons now, and started a new plan. His new plan was, I'm going to write a book that shows the Book of Mormon was written by someone other than Joseph Smith. And he picked Sidney, who he knew, and this Spaulding manuscript. So it came from a conversation he had with somebody who said, someone showed up at the Smith home one night late and no one knows who it was. And that's all he had. That was the thread. And he spun that into Sidney Rigdon, who was in Ohio, 1,000 miles away, found what Joseph Smith, heard about him, came to his home, and they colluded together to write the Book of Mormon. So it's far-fetched to begin with, but that was the premise. That's how it started. So Sidney, as you may remember the story, was a preacher, a very good preacher for the Church of Christ, the disciples of Christ. He had gone through, honestly, a very hard life. At one point in time in his preaching, he got tired of money. He said, I'm done with the preaching. This was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He actually started working with animal skins, skinning animals. Did that for a couple of years. His wife, bless her heart, stayed with him. He just was trying to show, I don't care about money. I just want to be a simple man. He later was invited by Alexander Campbell to come up to Ohio. I'm starting this new church. It's really good. I like the premise of it. I think you'll like it too, and you can help me. He began. He had nothing at this point in time. He was broke. He and his wife and children were broke. So they begin. They start preaching. He has a congregation. The congregation acknowledges he is really a man they want to follow. They like him. He's becoming famous in Upper Ohio. The church that he's now built, the elders get together and say, you know what, this is such a good man. We are going to build a home for Sidney, because they had nothing. Again, they were just hanging on by their teeth. So all these good things are coming. Right at that time is when he would have had to have written the Book of Mormon by himself. So the first question would be, why would he do that? He now has a claim. He's now making money. He's going to have a home. People love him. He's preaching something he can believe in. So all seems good. Then Parley P. Pratt comes, talks about the Book of Mormon. And Sidney is skeptical. He doesn't really want to read the Book of Mormon. Doesn't really know if he has interest in it at all. Parley says, listen, you know me. I've read this. This is the Word of God. This is the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ that you've been looking for. Read it. He does. He believes it, and he is baptized. And a number of people are shocked that he joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Shocked. He had it all set up. He was all ready to go. Now our good friend John Corrill comes to bear. Well, who's John Corrill? How did he fit into things? John was a friend and a fellow preacher with Sidney for several years in the Disciples of Christ. And he heard that Sidney had joined the church. He couldn't believe it. He went to him and said, are you nuts? What are you doing? And Sidney said, I read it. I felt the Spirit. I listened to the witnesses. There were 2 witnesses of the 4 people who came to see him who were witnesses of the Book of Mormon. I believed them. But Corrill persuaded him to go see Joseph Smith, because then they can really find out what really is real. And so Corrill and Sidney Rigdon go from Ohio back to Palmyra, where Joseph is. And they talk. And they learn. Corrill now says, I think I'm going to join the church. I like this stuff. So he joins. So things are happening. But at that time, this is 1830, so Mormonism Exposed hasn't come out yet. Or Unveiled, I apologize. So life's good. They go back. They start preaching to the people there. They start joining the church. More Mormons are in Ohio with Sidney than anywhere else in the country at that point in time. They got a whole bunch of folks there. And persecution is mounting in New York, so they say, we got to go. And so the entire body of Mormons pick up, sell what they have, sell what they can, and they move to Ohio. And Sidney's among the leaders of the church at that point in time. So now did Sidney write this or not? How would we know? So a lot of attention came to him in 34 because he became the primary author of the Book of Mormon. He didn't really know that until he heard about it, but he is it. He's everything. So a lot of people came to him. So what's really going on here? What's happening? And Sidney never, from 1830 till his death, denied the process of meeting Parley P. Pratt, receiving the Book of Mormon, reading it, listening to Oliver Cowdery, who's in the same group with Parley P. Pratt, John Whitmer, their testimonies of 3 and 8 witnesses. He believes it and he's baptized. That's his story. Sticks with it. Well, you may remember he left the church in the late 39 or 40 and then came back when Joseph was dead. He wanted to be the caretaker of the church. And the people said, sorry, we don't want you, Sidney. We're going to go with Brigham and we're going to go west. Now, a normal man would say, hey, if that's the case, I'm going to tell the truth. Yet to his death, he held that he never met Joseph before. In 1829, we went out to see him. His wife held that same testimony. But John Corrill was kind of the frosting on the cake. John was with him, again, all the way through the disciples of Christ, into the church. He left the church in 1839 when Sidney left it. He actually became a legislator in the legislature of Illinois. He became a lawyer. He became well known. And his testimony was, everything that Sidney is saying is true. So here's a second-hand man who's out of the church. There's no reason to hide anything or to lie. He says, everything here is just as I saw. Now, that was a big book. But by 1844, it had run its course. Now, people, the antis still use a lot of the information from it, and they still beat on the Mormons. But change is coming. And the change is, no man knows my history, which would come 110 years after Mormonism Unveiled was produced. And it will create a same type of earthquake in the antis as the first one did. That's the next video. Thanks so much. See you then.